Hello, everybody. Today, I want to tell you something that few people ever talk about because it's really extremely important, not just because it's wrong, and I'm going to tell you why it's wrong in a moment, but because it affects so many different aspects of our lives, and yet so very many of us don't even know about it. I'm going to be talking about the military and how the U.S. military presence in just two countries alone, Germany and Japan, is having such a tremendous negative impact. Imagine what I'm about to tell you is true, because if you'll allow yourself to imagine this, I think it's possible it could go a very long way to make clear what I'm admittedly stumbling over words to say. Trump, our current deal maker and chief, has made yet another deal, a deal of the century, a deal that no U.S. president in the past has not only ever done, but not even proposed doing. It's a wonderful deal, a beautiful deal, and coming from him, that's all we need to know. Trump's made a deal with President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, to put an autonomous Russian base in the continental United States. This is not a proposal, it's a done deal. The Russians just have to decide where they want to put it. As I said, this new Russian military base is completely autonomous. It will not be subject to any U.S. governmental laws. It's basically the equivalent of Las Vegas. Whatever happens on that base stays on that base. They are not subject to any local, state, or federal laws. Pure and simple. Now, at this point, I realize you're either falling out laughing or wondering how I could propose something so outrageous and ridiculous. And I wouldn't disagree with you in either case, but just allow me to ask this one question. And I want you to answer the question as though what I just said were in fact true. How would it make you feel? Would you feel anxious? Would you feel completely mortified and stupefied that our government has allowed a president and a foreign power's military to establish itself on U.S. soil? Well, I sure as hell would be feeling all of the above. And I'm pretty sure the vast majority of you folks out there would too. Now, here's what you don't have to imagine. As of 2026, America has 113 military bases in Japan and 174 bases in Germany, respectively. And that's only the number that are acknowledged. You can best believe there are more, perhaps many more. So this begs the most obvious question: why? The very simplest and most condensed answer is two primary reasons: money and power. I'd like for you to think about that for a moment because the implications of that situation are staggering, not just for Japan and Germany, but for America as well. And I'm about to tell you the reason why. Regardless of what we as Americans have been told or conditioned to believe, there is absolutely no justifiable reason, not safety, not security, not even economic interest, for the United States continuing to occupy Japan or Germany. And no matter how you wish to spin it, it is occupation. And it's only because both Japan and Germany are frightened of America's military might, not to mention a fair degree of corruption, that America's military still occupies both their countries, some 75 years after the end of World War II. And as far as the citizens of Japan and Germany are concerned, both of them overwhelmingly want America's military presence gone. So much for what the people want. Now, I'll admit that the problem with what I'm saying, and bear in mind, I'm only talking about Japan and Germany here. America's empire encroaches upon the world much further than that. So I'd like to refocus just a bit and tell you some of the reasons why I believe this boot to the throat form of diplomacy is counter to America's true national interest, meaning to its actual citizens. If you're still here, I applaud your curiosity because in the second part, I'm going to go a little deeper and say some things that may sound very unsettling, but it's the very fact that they are unsettling that at least you'll know you're receiving information that very few even have the courage to examine. Most Americans know, even if they won't openly admit it, they intuitively know just how fragmented our society has become. Here's just one very small, quick example of the fragmentation I speak of. A poll was taken in 1958, actually, the first year such polls were taken, and one of the simple questions citizens were asked was whether or not they trusted the government, if they felt as though the US government had their best interest in mind. The response was 73%. 73% responded positively that they felt and trusted the US government and that the government actually cared about their well being. An equally reliable and most recent poll saw that number plummet to just 17%. This is what happens when a society becomes fragmented, when they've lost faith in governmental institutions, when they've been playing by the rules, achieved a certain educational degree, but still have been consistently betrayed when the social contract has been broken and they no longer have faith in their government, as their standard of living and standard of security diminishes with each decade and year after year with no end in sight. This is also what happens to the societies and countries that are occupied. When what are essentially puppet regimes that essentially cater to the productive and economic demands of whatever power or country is militarily occupying them. I guess another way of putting this is despite any and all appearances, Japan and Germany are basically involved in a mob protection racket. I feel pretty certain I don't have to explain who the mobsters are. But what makes this even far worse is the downward spiral of those countries under such tyranny. The citizens become more fragmented, frightened, and isolated to the point where they can no longer function effectively and normally. So I ask you, my fellow Americans, does this even remotely sound familiar? If it does, that's because historically we're in good company. Because to a large extent, not entirely, but with the overall same trajectory, it's what brought about the collapse of the greatest technological and military empire the world had ever known, Rome. I could go on much longer about this, but I don't want to talk your ears off or presume on your time, so I'll just end with this. When societies lose their cultural heritage, when they become fragmented and isolated, individuals no longer allowed to share and take pride in their cultural heritage, that society is doomed, which is exactly what, in large part, happened to Rome. Ultimately, it wasn't the barbarian hordes that conquered Rome. It was first hollowed out and destroyed from within. So, if you found this episode informative or entertaining, please consider subscribing. And if you just want to reach out to me with whatever's on your mind, you can do so by clicking on my contact link in the description below. Until next time, this is Ernest, and that's all I've got. for today.